All right, we're live, and I got my head bopping with my music there. I have the pleasure to be joined today by Michael Kane. If you do not know Michael Kane, which I don't know how you wouldn't, Michael Kane is a science fiction and fantasy writer who has cut his teeth. I already screwed it up because this is what I do. I try and go off on my own, and then run whatever. But he's best known around here for his series After Moses, which is a sci-fi western. And what we are talking about today happens to be a different flavor of fantasy, and it is an American-inspired fantasy story. So Michael, by day, is a music director at a mid-sized church, and by night he is dreaming of these unseen lands. So I'm gonna go, kick it back over to Michael to talk about what we're here to talk about, which is the Witch of Hobomack Pass.
Well, thank you for having me on, Jessica.
Absolutely. Tell us about this new book.
Okay. Well, so the idea for this new book came a couple of years ago while I was still working on After Moses. I had the thought that most fantasy as we know it is distinctly European, right? Knights and castles and armor and dragons are all distinctly from the European imagination. There's no real analog in American experience and history. And so I put this post out on Twitter that did really pretty well. It went kind of viral in writing circles. I asked about what does American fantasy look like? And there was a lot of really good conversation and answers. Some people gave explicit examples, like Orson Scott Card's Alvin Maker series, which I have not read. Some people talked about Conan the Barbarian, coming from an American author and being fairly distinct from European philosophy, even if it's a little more old school in setting still. Some people talked about Edgar Rice Burroughs, which I think was a really on point. Some people talked about science fiction being the American fantasy. And so there was a lot of good conversation from it. And right there, I was like, okay, I want to do something American fantasy related when I finish After Moses. And so, I had to finish my 1,000,000-word series first. It was pretty important to get that done. But, while I was working on that, I was kind of just collecting ideas and thoughts and what does it take to do American fantasy? And so, over the next couple of years, it kind of percolated down that I always talk about when I'm thinking of a story, it starts as this big idea cloud of all these possibilities, and that usually somewhere along the way there'll be a couple of lightning specific points that will just cause it all to collapse down to more of a specific story rather than just this big cloud of possibility, right? And the main idea that helped do that is really this understanding of what one of the chief American myths is. And one of the chief American myths is the myth of the frontier. It's the idea that you can leave the safety of civilization in the cities. You can go out into the hard world. It will be dangerous. There might be dangerous animals. There will be people that may try and kill you. But if you persevere, you can carve out a slice of civilization for your family and maybe your neighbors too. Right? You can make a new civilization in the wild and prosper. That's this core part of American mythology. And from a literary standpoint, that developed very early into the Western, right? The Western as a genre began to develop before the West was even really fully closed even. But very quickly after that, the other interesting thing is science fiction begins to develop very shortly after the Western in the US, the American science fiction anyway. And you have Edgar Rice Burroughs writing A Princess of Mars, which takes John Carter from the American frontier in a red desert in Arizona to a red desert on Mars, and is already linking science fiction to the frontier. And so that frontier idea was something I really wanted to play into. And so I conceived of this series as After Moses books are pretty long. They were big science fiction. It's sci-fi western, but there's a space opera element in the scale by the end of it. It's a big series, and the books are long. And so I wanted to do shorter adventures because that's more of a traditional American pulp adventure, type thing is shorter. And so I'm conceiving of shorter books, more Louis L'Amour length, or if you've not read that Great Gatsby length, that 50 to 60,000 word novel,
Yeah.
something short and digestible, and a lot more of them for the series, but treating each book as love letters to the American frontier and stories told across those frontiers. And so these first three books are going to be they it does not take place in our world. It's not directly about America. I have a stand-in nation, the Republic of Columbia, named after the earliest personification of America was the goddess Columbia. You see her in a lot of early American art as this Greek robed woman, often with a sword, often with a shield, sometimes with some other symbolism, but pointing westward and leading people westward. Um, we still have that in the District of Columbia. Washington D.C. is still named after her. And so the Republic of Columbia, it's going to be about a very American stand-in, and it's going to be about them pushing westward. The first three books are going to be about an Appalachian-style frontier, and the first book, The Witch of Hobomack Pass, is the first one of those. If you know anything about Appalachian stories, you know that they get a little dark and weird, and there's creatures in the woods and things that go bump in the night. Because that's what the Appalachians are like. That's what their stories are, and you have mist and fog filled hollows and valleys. And so this first one has a bit of that. Adventure in the woods, men with muskets. It's set in a very 1770s style time period, and so you don't have revolvers and gunslingers. It's not a western. Although future books may become westerns, as the stories move west and time passes. But for now, it's muskets, and so you have muskets and monsters and a young man coming of age on the edge of the wilderness. Jessica got to read it. She was
I
very
did.
she was very kind and read it for me. I was looking for somebody who uh, knew horses, because I have not had the opportunity to be around horses very much in my life. So get a horse girl to help correct you. And she provided some good insight on a couple of scenes and was able to let me tighten up a couple scenes to be a little less movie horse and a little more realistic.
Indeed. Yes. So I remember actually that original post that you made around the idea of what is the American
Yeah.
fantasy myth. And I remember that it got me thinking because yes, you're very right. I've seen, obviously the European fantasy, and then I've even seen like some more Middle Eastern things kind of popping up more
There is
recently.
absolutely, especially with the push for diversification in the last
Mhm.
years, you see some more Middle Eastern, but I think you really see a lot of
Asian too, yeah.
Asiatic fantasy written by
Yeah.
Westerners. Um, and you see other stuff too. It's like, that's one of the reasons that the first Black Panther movie was so successful, was because it had a slick sense of style. It was something very different. That Afrofuturism was
Mhm.
really bright and colorful and fun. It was more fun than the writing of the movie. It's not. I think there was some issues with the writing, but the movie was fun and gorgeous. And so people love that kind of stuff. And so no shade on anyone writing European fantasy,
No,
with
no, no.
dragons, Jessica. But
I just wrote a story that takes place in like a Mongolian type steppe. So
well, there we go.
there we go. It's not quite the same, but I'm branching out too. But no, I think that's interesting because I do think there is there's an opportunity there to, reach into that really quintessential American experience, that history, that richness, that very unique in the world perspective and culture that is it exists in westerns, but definitely not within that fantasy element. And I think we
Right.
have a lot of mythology and a lot of like folk stories and a lot of things that can be drawn from to create a compelling fantasy world that's completely untapped.
We we are descended from European culture, right? We are just directly descended mostly from British, which is why British inspired fantasy, that Tolkien basically pushed to the entire world, resonates so much with us still because we're the children of the British, right? In that sense. But we're also distinct now, and so something that's immediately distinct about American experience from European experience is the woods are different in America. The forests and the woods are different in American stories and folktales, and there's several different theories on that. Um, One of them is that there hasn't been a bit of untamed, unmanaged forest in Europe for 1,000 years. 1,000 years ago, every ounce of woodland in Europe was already being managed and taken care of by somebody, right? When European explorers are first founding uh, cities and colonies on the East Coast, what they found was a wall of trees that started at the coast, and no matter how far north they sailed and how far south they sailed, the trees didn't stop. And the trees continued all the way from the East Coast and didn't stop until sometime around Oklahoma. There's not a single place that wasn't solid forest. There, I found in reading about this, I found at least one writer of the day called it the universal forest. Right? It was just that dense and that unmanaged. There were small pockets of managed forests that Native Indians were managing, but those were relatively small. Their population was relatively low. Some debate about exactly how much, but 10 million in the entire what basically is the United States is a high estimate for how many there were, right? And,
Yeah. And I
uh,
imagine that some of those forests were like quite intimidating because they hadn't been logged. So like I,
correct.
I remember seeing pictures. So I've gone to a logging museum and you'll see like the pictures of like the guys around those trees and it's like
Hmm.
massive.
Right, right. And so you have actual, what we call it was just in completely old growth forest. They did not have old growth forest anymore in Europe. And so that's one reason why American folktales center around the woods so much, and the woods are just darker, stranger places because they were distinct. They were highly distinct to the Europeans when they got here. Another really interesting one is that every European folktale had centuries to pass through the lens of Christianity within its transmission. And so you don't have the straight pagan tales transmitted on their own, whereas Europeans in the United States directly recorded the folk tales from the native Indians. And so we have some of their very strange, dark pagan tales just directly recorded that passed to the settlers and were retold as folk tales there. And so you have that difference of the more immediate pagan influence and the more sanitized, Christianized tales that you got out of Europe, because again, for the most part, paganism died out in Europe quite long ago. And so that's just one of those neat things about American, that's different about American fantasy is that the woods are just different. Sure, you end up getting your Mirkwoods in your Mirkwoods from Lord of the Rings, right? Your dark, scary woods,
Yeah.
but that's just an ancient memory to the Europeans, where it's much more recent memory, living memory. We still have more forests everywhere. We still have way more trees than them because we're just a lot bigger than any one of them.
Yeah.
So, so that's an interesting thing, and there's other stuff too, because it's like an important part of American mythology is firearms, right? Uh, Um,
Yep.
so much of our history, early history, and moving westward is closely based to the history of the firearm, and that we start with just muzzle loading muskets. And around the time of the Revolutionary War, the first rifles are coming out, and the rifle revolutionizes the frontier more than it did warfare. The Pennsylvania long rifle and the Kentucky long rifle are the two that really were the kings of the frontier. And because it goes with a musket, it has a smooth bore, which means it's not very accurate. You have a range of around 100 yards in theory. Are you going to hit that deer you're aiming at that's 100 yards away? You might, or it might just be inaccurate enough that you don't, right? Well, suddenly when you have these long rifles, just a couple of years later, suddenly you have pretty good accuracy to 200 yards, which makes all the difference in the world when you're living out in the middle of nowhere on homesteads and the primary currency is in bucks, not dollars as in bucks, but actual
Actual
buckskins.
bucks, yeah.
Actual buckskins. I found one of the things while I was researching for this story is I found charts of from a specific little settlement on the frontier that had listed how many bucks for any given thing, how many buckskins, which is amazing. It's like, okay, 25 bucks for this I think that was for a flintlock pistol, which would not have been particularly common on the frontier. Not super useful, but that was just what I happened to see. So 25 bucks, so the firearm. So that revolutionizes the frontier. And as we move westward and the firearms advance through the years, eventually you get to revolvers, which, in the Colt single action army, the gun that tamed the West. And so that's got to be part of American fantasy. The firearm has to be part of it. The man with the gun is the wizard, right? So that's another thing I tried to do is I've got a hunter with a hero's weapon. He has a very special firearm. It's a couple decades ahead of schedule. It's a little more advanced for the time, made by a master artisan who he's retired. He retired and sold his company that was making guns for the government. But if you know where to find him, he'll still make you a one of a kind masterpiece. And so this hunter has this revolving rifle, this 5-chamber big bore revolving rifle that's no weapon like it ever quite existed, but it's still quite plausible, just a little ahead of its time. Somebody could have made one. But that's what that's one thing. Fantasy. A hero needs his hero sword, right? And so a hero needs his hero's gun. And so that was one of the things. One of the very first things was firearms, and I had to have a special gun. Have to have a special gun.
I love that. I love that. It's like it's not a magic sword because it's American. Like
right.
Guns.
Right. I have a gun that is the cryptic statement about it. Is that it won't easily miss for one who's earned the right to shoot it. Right. And what does that mean? I don't. Well, you have to kind of read the story and find out how that plays into with the characters. So, but the two main characters in the story. So the basic setting is that a general has been commissioned by Congress to open the passes to the west. That they were closed for a war. Cannons were used to collapse some rock walls to block up the pass. And so this general is being sent with a company and all the tradesmen and camp followers and civilians that entails. They're going to go west and reopen the road. And the general is taking along his son, and the general and the son are the two main characters to start this out. So I have a man who's in his 40s or late 40s who's worrying about keeping his men alive and worrying about logistics and very adult things. And then the other point of view is a 12-year-old who's learning about the wild and learning to shoot and out for the adventure of his life. So there's kind of two halves to the story, the adult half and the half that's kind of aimed at teenage boys. I really want this to be the kind of series where adults enjoy it. They like it. They go, yeah, this is good. And I want my 14-year-old nephew or my 12-year-old son to read it because it's, steeped in steeped in American thought and adventure and heroism and bravery and all of those things that we need to be instilling in young men.
Yeah, and as I was, so again, I got it an advanced copy, so I got to beta for this, and I was thinking that it had many elements that I can see my sons definitely gravitating towards, and it was, there were spooky elements that I know that they just love, but they weren't overwhelming, but at the same time it's enough, it's definitely enough creep factor that the 10-year-old boy is going to be into that.
It's kind of funny because I don't really like that much horror,
I
right?
don't
I'm not
either, but
really a horror guy, not in movies. I don't really get horror in books too much. That effect doesn't pass to me in reading very much. Um, but again, talking about the Appalachians, you have to have some of that, right? Because there's creepy and there's weird stuff. And the all of the critters that are mentioned and come up against are, actual Appalachian folktales. I'm not going to mention the main one, but most of the specific details I took from some version of the story or another to kind of make an amalgamated version of this particular folktale, which was fun to
yeah,
do. Which was fun to do.
like one of
Um,
the creepiest things that you did. There was a scene where there's like lights on the top of the mountain, and like
oh
that
yeah.
creeped me out. Like I don't
So
like it wasn't even necessary. Like creeped me out.
so what? And you know what? I based that on a real story about a specific mountain in the Appalachians, Brown Mountain. There are long time stories about lights being seen. There's probably some explanations now, and it's not that exciting. Um, but I do need to mention something about that later. So when I talk about the artist, we need to talk about the
Yeah.
lights again, okay? And there's a reason for that. Uh, but I tried to do as many of those things as I could. So, but yeah, horror is weird. I don't think it really. I don't think it is horror. There is some folk horror element, no doubt. But where I think it diverges is I think Witch of Hobomack Pass is a lot more heroic than traditional horror is. Um, I think it's probably most spooky in the sense when Jaws is spooky before you see the shark, right? When I've always thought that that's probably the sharpest weapon in the arsenal of horror is when you haven't seen the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago when I was in high school, The Ring was a horror movie from forever ago.
Oh yeah.
I watched it with some friends in high school. I got outvoted, and it's creepy. It's genuinely creepy until she crawls out of the television, and I started laughing while the female friends are all like jumping over the couch. I'm like, that's it. That's where we're at. So anyway, it's not hard horror if anybody's worried about that. It's just a little spooky, little things hunting you in the woods. That's all. Just getting hunted in the woods.
All right. So we're here because you have a Kickstarter. So the book is not out yet, but you are doing a Kickstarter because you want to get art in this book to enhance the experience. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pop up some of the things you showed because the cover of this particular book is absolutely beautiful. Like the artwork that you have for it.
So the artist is Jordan Holt. He is from Appalachia, and so he was kind of my first choice whenever I started kind of looking at what I wanted to do. And the other thing that really sold me on him at the time, and this picture is certainly relevant to that, is when I started talking to him, he was trying to get away from doing digital art. He's done these 3 comic book volumes, this comedic retelling of Theseus. They're very good. I've got the first 2 volumes. Third ones should be shipping out soon. He started the first volume is all digital, and as it goes on, he was doing more and more of it actual physical and touched up with digital and doing the coloring digital. But he said that physical makes him get better. when when you're doing digital art, which is great, and there's a lot of utility in digital art. It's a very powerful tool, but you can press Control Z and undo that stroke you just did, right? And so
Yep.
when you don't have that, you have to work with every stroke you make. It's like, well, can I work with this? How do I work with this? How do I not make those mistakes? And so he's trying to go back to doing as much physical as possible. And in our day and age of everything digital and half of the digital now being AI, where no one knows what's real anymore, I thought that was just a great thing. And so here's this cover he made. You can see in the top left the first sketch, kind of a values pencil sketch, a layout sketch. And you can see on the right there, you can kind of get a sense of scale with that pipe. Um, it's big. The cover's bigger than the book is by quite a bit to get so you can pack in detail. It's a gouache painting, which is not a word that I knew. It was one of those ones that I'd seen before and would have pronounced gouache or gouache. Uh, Gouache is a kind of an opaque watercolor. So it works like watercolor, but it's not as light and airy. You can layer it on thick and black like you see on
Yeah,
that
it's
left.
definitely got a rich, dark, like
Yeah, so I started
color.
looking into it. Once he said he could do the cover in gouache, I started looking into it. And so do you remember if I say like all the old Hardy Boys covers, can you kind of
Yep.
picture some of those?
Yeah.
Most of those are oil, but there is a good number of those that are gouache. So there's quite a history of gouache covers, in other words. Not quite as famous as oil covers for books. But there's not an insignificant number of these, like I said, this dark watercolor. And so if you go back to the other one, he hand did the letters. I had a f- I have a font that's kind of close, that he kind of based it on. That way I could pair it with marketing with an actual font and not need custom stuff for marketing. But he hand did the lettering even. So yeah, really really cool stuff. Really fun guy to work with. Do you have the full cover? Did I give you that? Oh yeah, there we
Um,
go.
yeah,
Oh, that's that one that's got that.
just little lines.
I know. I realized that was there, and I forgot to delete that version, but
It
that's not
happens.
on the front cover.
But yeah,
So
no,
yeah,
it's very eye-catching. Uh, I love the creepy eyes. There's just a lot of like you keep looking at it and you can kind of get more details.
another cool thing about Jordan, Jordan Holt, again the artist, is he read the book before starting. He said, "Hey, can I read it?" I was like, "I've got an early version. You can read it," and that's really
Absolutely.
cool. And so when we first started talking about the cover, I sketched out very badly in paint a couple of layouts, and he goes, "What do you think about this instead?" And he, gives a really quick layout sketch for this. I was like, "Yeah, that's better. We'll go with your
Yeah,
idea."
I love that. Like I know I don't want to set the expectation for artists. You got to read everything, but my artist, the one that does the covers for my Fires of an Empire, actually reads the books
Ah,
too,
that's
and he's
great.
the one he will inform suggestions for the scenes that he thinks would be the most interesting for covers. And
Mm.
it helps me because I might have an idea, but it's not necessarily the best one.
It, so you've had similar experience then of working, because I know some writers have had unfortunate experiences with artists that just weren't very helpful in that regard.
Yeah.
But I love getting to work with uh, a skilled artist that has good eye and good opinions and comes up with things on their own. And I'm like, oh, that's cooler than I thought. I'm gonna change that description to match what I see right there because that's good. Let me go back and make a few edits.
Yeah.
Love it. Love getting to work with someone else that's creative like that. But I want interior illustrations too, and so that was the other real reason to do Kickstarters, raise capital for interior illustrations. Now, the what I what I told Jordan for a style guide. Do you remember the Great Illustrated Classics?
I do.
I was smart enough to have one. They had kind of this bold red title, white books,
Yeah.
highly condensed that a bunch of them are really just retellings. You can't condense Moby Dick to 30,000 words. That's just a retelling at that point, right? But they were a lot of. I think that they started in the late 70s and they were published through the late 80s, I think. And there's a few dozen of them. And there's an illustration every page, like a lot of illustrations. And they have this kind of, I don't know if this will be seen. You can't really see the people very well, but there we go. This very traditional, old fashioned art style. Well, they were actually, most of the guys that worked on these were Marvel artists, Marvel line artists.
Oh.
And so they were comic book guys that did these, which is convenient because Jordan is a comic book guy. He's got a lot of experience there. And so I gave him kind of those as an example of that kind of little more traditional, a little more old fashioned. And man, he nailed it. So this particular scene, this is from chapter 6, the Hamley homestead up on the hill that they go visit. And the great thing about getting somebody that was from the region, he based it on a historical homestead that he's visited that's in his area and that he's seen with his own eyes to do the whole thing. So it's like, man, talking about those lights, the Brown Mountain lights, there is an illustration with that. And Jordan's been there and seen them.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, that helps a heck of a lot.
I know. It's like, did you mean them to kind of be like these? I was like, yes. He's like, okay, I've seen. I know about those. That's 60 miles from me, and yeah, I was like, oh, perfect. So, I for the Kickstarter, I promised I was going to pay for 10 illustrations myself, one for each chapter. Most of them full pagers with some half pagers mixed in. And I want to do a full 21. And so I'm kind of looking for that last little bit to justify justify all those illustrations. The way I look at books is they're big investments.
Yes.
They're big investments, but from the business side of things, I'm planning on selling them for the rest of my life. And so breaking even on the front side is fabulous. Right. Not going in the hole to start with is fabulous. So that's why I'm doing Kickstarter. It's going well. Let's pull it up. It is at 6,548. And I've promised if it hits 7,000, I'll do all 21 illustrations that I want to do. So it's right there. There's 3 days. 3 days left. Ends Friday night. Yeah, we'll go with 3 days. Close enough. So getting close. I think we'll pull it out. So yeah, so this is a half pager. Did I give you a couple more?
You did.
Yep. There's a full pager. And he's doing these in ink. These are ink. The book size is 5.5 by 8.5 is the page size, and so he's doing these at double scale. So these are like 10 by 16 inch pieces of paper that he's working with, so they're big. But yeah, ink is a little tricky with some stuff because you only have black and you only have white. And so for a bright scene like this, you can see how he has to just barely work with fine strokes to give form to the fire in the burning wagon there. Yeah, there were a few asks that were pretty challenging that took quite a few. And something else I learned is that there is white ink. It's very thick stuff. And so there are some places where he worked with black things out and went back with white detail. So this is chapter 1 illustration. You can see I've got the original pencil sketch there. We have the hunter that I talked about and his slightly fantastic revolving rifle. You have Joseph McKee and John Lockridge, the 12-year-old boy. And in the final in the back, you can see his father coming out after talking with the other officer there. And some lovely horses. I I don't have any more horses in this first batch, but I definitely need another horse or two horse illustration in the second batch that I commission after the Kickstarter.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, beautiful illustrations, and I love the idea of getting these in a book. So I think everybody should go and get back this Kickstarter. You could have, I believe, one of the rewards is actually possession of one of these.
Yeah. So the main thing I'm pushing the hardback over the paperbacks. I am getting a small print run, so the hardbacks will not be printed on demand. I am ordering a few hundred copies that I'll move as many as I can in the Kickstarter, and then I'll have to sell off the next over the next couple of years. But the thing about getting a print run is they are a little higher quality than print on demand. The bindings will be sewn. I'm getting gold gilded edges as the one piece of bling I'm getting, because that just feels good and traditional and old fashioned to have a green cloth book with
The gold paper, yeah.
yep, a green cloth book with gold gilded edges will match the logo. So I really want people to get the hardback if you can. It's $25. And then I charge shipping afterwards. I don't charge shipping up front. Kickstarter says charge your shipping up front. You'll get more backers that way. But I really don't want to do that, because if I have to charge shipping up front, I have to overestimate. I have to overcharge in order to not short myself. And because I'm already set up to ship from my website, I will deal with actual shipping charges when it comes. It'll take me a little longer, but save everyone $2 to $5. So I'll charge shipping later. I'll do a shipping invoice later to save everyone some money. So the main one is, again, I want is the get a hardback. I've got the next tier up. I've got kind of a, get your name in the back of the book is kind of a founder sort of thing in the hardbacks. But I've got these coins that those people will get. These are super cool.
Ooh.
Oh, I think am I mirrored on the actual stream?
You are. I think you're mirrored, yeah. But
no, there's not an option there to flip that. Okay, sometimes I've seen the option to flip it, but there's this Republic of Columbia coin with Lady Columbia there. It's really 3D too. It sticks up, and then the other side is Hobomack Pass.
Oh, look at that!
And so it's like a kind of like a commemorative historical coin. If people like them, I might do them for future books. So it's like commemorative historical or kind of like national park coins for these locations through the series. We'll see how it goes. It's fun. These are really cool. But as Jessica was saying, it's kind of weird putting expensive things on Kickstarters. I feel kind of bad charging a lot of money for things, but everything says that you never know when you've got some readers with disposable income and who want to patronize you and your work. And really, that's how all the arts used to work a couple centuries ago, is people with money contacted somebody with skill and said, I want you to make this thing. And then they paid them and they made it. Patronization was the main way that the arts existed until like 150, 200 years ago, when people started trying to sell their own work. And so this is patronage. That's the route I'm going. I've got some tiers set up. For $150, you can be the patron of a half-page piece of art. There'll be a page in the back with, that you were the patron, you funded it, you get credit for that, and I'll send a print of it. I've got a more expensive version where I'll send the original. You'll get the original hand-inked art from Jordan. And Jordan and I will split the extra money on that. So the artist will get paid more if someone buys an original as well. So I think I've had 7 people patronize an illustration. I don't think I've had anybody buy an original yet, but I've had 7 people. I think 3 full pagers, which are $300, and 4 half pagers. So
wow,
yeah, which is really cool because, like I said, patronization of the arts is how it used to work, and I'm treating it like that. That that is the piece of art that they made happen. I'm gonna let them go through once it's over and I have all the art. I'm gonna let them see all of them, and in the order that we're back, so the earlier people will get first choice, pick which one that they want to be have patronized,
Yeah.
have their name on. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's pretty cool. It's been a very long month doing the Kickstarter. Kickstarters last forever. They just never end. But coming down to the end and hoping to cross that finish line to 7K.
Now I believe is this the second Kickstarter you did? You did the audiobook one. Have you done one before this or
This was my second. Yeah, last fall I did an audiobook one for After Moses. And if you're interested in my sci-fi westerns, you can get those as add-ons to the campaign. So if you look at add-ons, you can get paperbacks and hardbacks and even the audiobooks from that. Or you can get them through my website. But if it's in the next few days, do it through the campaign. It looks better if all the numbers go through there. So, but yeah, I did last year. The goal was doing one, and it raised enough for me to produce two. I got the first two. Is that a copy of Mein Kampf on the shelf behind him? No, it is not. What are we
I don't
talking
even know what
about?
he's looking at.
We're talking about the one in that direction. That's Travel by Star by Paul Scott Grill. It's a fabulous indie book. You should read it if you haven't. Rude.
Into that chat. It was keep
Yeah.
keep it grounded.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it's been busy. It's going well. So I'm promising the books by March. I think it'll be before then. I just say that because I'll have another batch of illustrations to get done with the artist, so that'll take some time. Final layout still has to take place. There'll probably be one final round of mild edits that goes on. And then I'll have to actually get the print run, which is going to take a couple of months to get in. So I think there's a pretty solid chance that they ship out before the end of the year, but I've said March just to be
Safe.
cautious because I haven't done a print run before, right? And it'll be a new adventure when an entire pallet of books shows up at my doorstep.
You'll be busy. You'll be busy packing.
It will be busy. That's fun though.
So how do you get the boxes to pack all your own books? Just buy in bulk boxes or?
Yeah. For the most part, I sell slow enough that you can buy bulk boxes on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
I have some extra packing material, some extra paper and stuff, but mostly I can scavenge packaging material and not get into the stuff that I bought too often. But yeah, you can buy them in bulk. I might this time buy them from Uline or a cardboard company, since if I've got a few hundred of them, I know how many of them I have, so I might buy more than packs of 25 or 50. I might get a few hundred boxes this time that are the appropriate size. So we'll just have to see. One of the funny things about shipping books yourself, so I've shipped from my website for a little over a year now, and you think you've thought through every possible combination of things that people could buy from you, and you've worked out this combination, this combination, this combination, and then somebody gets some really weird combination, or they buy two of a book and some of the others, because it's like, oh, now what do I do? So I'm scrounging around the house for an Amazon box that I got. I can cover over everything and ship this one in a reused box because, oh, you got an order type I wasn't expecting.
That's fun.
It is fun.
Think about.
It is actually really fun to ship and sell yourself. I mean, for starters, it's obviously you have a lot of startup costs getting there, but it is fun to do, and it's also fun to keep 98% of the sale price. Just basically the processing fees I don't keep. That's really nice. Um, but there's definitely it's definitely a big jump for an author. I at a previous job 10 years ago, I worked at a small online retailer, so I kind of had a heads up on some of the processes and things I would need to do. But it's a lot of fun. I like it. I love packaging up books and getting to take them to the post office and drop them off at the post office with the kids and stuff like that. So I enjoy it, and it'll when the Kickstarter ships out here in a few months or early next year, it'll be taking wagon loads into the post office with the kids. So that'll be fun.
Excellent. So it's getting to that time when I usually invite the authors if they would like to read a little bit from the book to entice folks into, in this case, backing this Kickstarter.
Yes. Let me see here. Let me see if I can lay eyes on this pot. Okay, I found something I think is a little more exciting and a little creepy and strange because I've sold creepy and strange. So John and the hunter have been out hunting, and John has just returned with the horse after taking a doe that they killed back to camp, and he's returned to where the hunter has another doe that he's been quartering. The hunter held up a hand to silence him, and John obeyed. He unslung his musket and opened his cartridge case, but again the hunter stopped him. John waited and watched. The darkness under the pines was deep, but different than the foul vapors of the witch and her hellhounds. The fog that trickled down the hill in little eddies held no stench, yet was no less unnatural. Minutes passed. Slowly, the darkness in the valley lifted, though the pines remained locked in twilight. The clouds above parted, and shafts of sunlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating motes in the still air. John breathed a deep sigh of relief. He'd only recently met a horror in the woods, and he wasn't prepared to come face to face with another. A shaft of sunlight broke through the pine stand and fell upon something that shone white like bone. It moved and flashed in the light, and John saw that it was an enormous rack of antlers, like the crown of an emperor that reached high into the boughs. Columbia had once fought a war to free itself of kings for all time, and yet the woods cared little for such notions. Here were older laws than fledgling republics with visions of conquering a continent. Here in the wild there was an absolute ruler. That it was a most terrible enemy, John had little doubt. The antlers turned from the light, and the apparition, whatever it was, melted into the darkness. There we
I
go.
believe we have an illustration of that.
We do have an illustration of that, actually.
There you go.
That was one of those really complex scenes to render in ink.
I can imagine.
That went back lots of passes of slightly adding more layers to get that mix of light and dark.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. So definitely go back it. I'm working with that last batch of 10. I think we're working on the 10th illustration right now. Jordan, actually, no, we have the 10th one. We're working on a chapter header illustration right now is where we're at. So technically there's 11, but the chapter header will be in every chapter. They're not going to be unique, sadly. So yeah, definitely go out, consider backing. The hardback is definitely the one that I want you to get.
It's a good value, $25 for beautiful hardback. Support this project. It's, feeding Michael. It's going to feed his artists.
Exactly.
We want to do these things. Be a patron, right? Be a patron.
Patronize the arts. Yep. Patronize American artists telling American stories.
And it's a good story. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did back this Kickstarter. I look forward to getting a copy that I intend fully to share it with my sons, who I think will quite enjoy it as well.
You'll have to let me know what they think.
I absolutely will. But yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, I do have a link to the Kickstarter. So if you're watching it within the next few days, obviously click a link into that. I will go ahead and share this back out on X with the link to the Kickstarter, and uh, yeah, I would encourage everybody to do this because again, as an indie author, like everything comes out of our pockets. Like we don't have anybody helping us out. And so when we want to do a more ambitious project like this, when we want to get art in our books, like that is out of our pockets. So if we can know that the book will sell, if you were thinking about it or considering buying this book, buy it now, support the thing up front, and then
Buy it up front so that I'm not sitting here trying to sell books for the next few years making a profit, because it makes it easier to turn around and do the next book and do illustrations in the next book if the money keeps flowing.
exactly. But I'm excited that you're doing this project. I think it's great to have American fantasy. I love that this is something that is an accessible thing for not just adults or children, but like it's like a family story. I
Right.
love that is something that can be shared. I love the
And,
American mythology.
and that's my goal, is to make the series a generational tale. And so while these first three books are going to kind of be in a short period, after that, there's going to be time jumps. John Lockridge is going to grow up. He's going to get married, have kids. Time is going to pass and generations will move westward, is kind of the idea. Something a little similar, I guess, to Louis L'Amour's, was it the Sackets, I
Mhm.
believe. Um, and something else that's a little funny is I'm a plotter. I engineer my stories, very, very closely. And I engineered my last series very closely too. But I haven't engineered this series in the same way deliberately. I know where it ends. There is an ending point, and there's like a thematic ending to all of the ideas of the series. There's an ending scene, and I know what it is, and I know where it is, right? But I don't know hardly anything else in between that. I don't know how many books it'll be. And I'm doing that on purpose because it's a frontier. And when I get there, I'm going to have to discover it and explore it in each new stage. And so maybe that's a little hokey and a little cheesy, but that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to write it when I get there. And then I'm going to get to each story and I'm going to highly engineer each story. But the series as a whole is not as engineered.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Michael, for joining me.
Yeah,
And again,
thank you for having me on, and thank you for reading and keeping my horses from being movie horses.
I any way that I can help, I am happy to help with that. It's one thing I definitely know I know.
Well, I definitely know I don't know that, and so it's useful to have experts in your back pockets.
Anybody else needs a horse expert to be to read for them, I'm happy to do so. All right. With
All
that, I'm
right,
going to go ahead and end our stream. Thank you, everybody, and
thank
have
you.
a